This time it's the Honda CT110. Honda's CT110, very much like the CT125 that you can see with here, is a small dual sport motorcycle that was developed by Honda in around 1980 and was sold in various parts of the world. It is based on the earlier CT90 model, which in turn came from earlier CT50 models and CT70s. The bike uses a 105cc 4-stroke engine which is mounted horizontally just as it is with a cub, and in fact the frame is essentially that of a cub, although of course the front forks are much better than a cub to allow it to operate off-road. And in fact the front brake barely operates on a cub over harsh surfaces. The CT is of course much different. It operates over rough surfaces very well, and even though it's built down to price, the suspension is pretty well up to the job of carrying a small bike like the 110 over rough surfaces. Some models of the 110 use a low ratio gearbox, and this is found particularly on models sold in the United States. The models sold in Australia and New Zealand often don't feature this. These models were sold to the postal service there by their affectionately known as Postie bikes, but were not actually sold over the counter for many years and were only much later available as essentially a civilian model. Not surprisingly, a low-cost, off-road capable machine is very popular in some areas of Africa, particularly Tanzania, where the machine is still widely used today. The CT110's engine is 105cc and of course it's based off the Cub 90 engine. Unlike the Cubs, although it still uses the semi-automatic transmission, it actually has a 4-speed box, as opposed to the 3 speeds which you find on the Cub models. Fully fueled, the machine only weighs around 92 kilos, so of course it's incredibly easy to handle. And Deb, who test rode this one, found it an absolute doddle in pretty much any conditions. The great thing about a bike like this, particularly given its very low seat height of just 740mm, is that it gives great confidence. Even Deb could easily flat foot this bike, so you don't feel too concerned when you go off-road with it. It just feels like a slightly heavy mountain bike, but with a very low seat. The bike uses 2.75 by 17-inch tyres, front and rear. On many bikes, people fit trials tyres. These are really useful tyres on a bike like this because they're hard wearing and yet give reasonable grip both on and off-road. We used it on sand and gravel during our time with the bike and found it absolutely excellent. And of course the great thing is if you fall off, it's incredibly easy to pick up. The brakes are of course drum front and rear. These are not the most powerful in the world, but given the light weight of the bike they function pretty well. And at least unlike the Cub, the conventional forks mean that it will stop reasonably well on rough ground. One major plus for these bikes compared to the new 125 is they are a little bit lighter, a little bit easier to handle, and also the seat was really comfortable. Deb found it incredibly comfortable and could easily imagine covering huge distances on these bikes. The bike does have a 5.5 litre tank, which I think is slightly larger than that found on the modern 125, and given the bike's impressive fuel consumption, you could probably cover a couple hundred miles on a tank full if you're careful. But of course bikes like this are not about the spec sheet, they're about the kind of confidence they give you. An ordinary rider would ride one of these off-road and dirt and trails very happily all day long, and if it fell over you can easily pick it up, so that gives you a level of confidence you would not have on a much larger bike. The little horizontal engine makes a great little sound. It's not ear-splittingly loud, it's not a big single, but it does make a nice little beefy sound which sort of almost gives the impression of a larger motor, but it's a very pleasant sound nonetheless. It's not intrusive and shouldn't really disturb the neighbours. There's a carry rack on the back of the bikes which allows you to carry quite a lot of luggage for your round the world trip should you wish to undertake one, and believe me, given the reliability record of these bikes, anything is possible. On tarmac, the narrowness of the chassis makes the bike really easy to nip in and out of obstacles such as traffic, and it handles pretty well too given its light weight. Even with those hard trials tyres, it grips pretty well through the corners. The downside with these machines is trying to find one. Whilst there are plenty of Cubs around, in the UK the bikes are never officially imported, so it's very hard to get hold of one. They do crop up occasionally, but they've usually been imported by somebody, and which means given their rareness, they're going to be fairly expensive to buy. And this is of course going to be an old bike by now, so you should expect the usual problems you would get with an older bike. Usual things like worn out wheel bearings and brakes, and the engines that are just getting a little bit tired. Of course, a key thing that tends to wear out on small bikes like this is the carburetor, and that's probably the thing that's most often neglected. If you've got a model you're trying to restore, replacing the carburetor is probably a really good idea, as I've found with some projects they can really stall when it comes to carburation. So if you've got one of these bikes as a project, placing the carburetor can absolutely transform the way the engine performs. Weather protection is pretty much non-existent, unlike the Cub. There's no leg shields, so if you go out on a rainy day, you are going to get wet. Luckily, the rack on the back means you can carry your waterproofs. Performance on road is fairly modest. It's only 7.5 horsepower engine after all, so don't expect to be tearing along at 60 miles an hour because you're going to be disappointed. However, be patient and be realistic about the performance, and I'm sure on the right road you'll have an absolutely marvellous time. So there we are. I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, thank you very much for watching.